So we have about, 7 months until the Eastern Conference Finals or so. And there's a chance that this video will be obsolete because you never really know what's going to happen in the NBA. But I think as of right now, most of us would agree. It's looking like Bucks-Sixers is going to be the Eastern Conference Finals. So why not do a preview of that right now, because there's nothing else going on in the NBA right now. So the first question is, who's the best player in that series? Is it Giannis or is it Embiid? I think if we're ranking the best players in the NBA, you definitely name Giannis first. But Embiid, if he can get into shape, and that's the biggest question with him, then perhaps the gap between them is either non-existent, or maybe there's a chance Embiid could actually be better than Giannis. I mean, I know Embiid's efficiency and stuff was not good against the Raptors, but the on-off court numbers were just so staggering. Like, I just looked at it on NBA.com, and it was like, in the 90 minutes that Embiid did not play in that series against Toronto, whatever it was, the Sixers were like minus 50, and then with him they were like plus 20. So the dude's overall impact is just there. The attention he draws on offense, the defense that he plays, all that stuff. And now that Horford is on Philly, that could be the 1-2 punch that can really slow down Giannis. Now, we did see the Raptors do that same thing against Giannis. They slowed him down. He still put up 20-something a game, but he wasn't destroying them, right? And there were times when he was, I don't want to say exposed, but it was revealed just how much progress he still needs to make on his playmaking. Because there were times when he was driving into that Raptors defense with all those big bodies and smart defenders, and he was just kind of like, what do I do right now, you know? Sometimes teammates were open, he would see him a second too late, that kind of thing. And I think Philly's defense is definitely capable of doing those same things. And, I mean, the case that you would make for them against the Raptors, which was like, well, they have so much spacing, it's, you know, the Raptors aren't going to be able to play the defense they really want to play. We saw in the end that really wasn't the case. Now, that being said, if Fred VanVleet doesn't hit a couple of tough threes, there's a chance the Bucks at least go to a Game 7 against Toronto. And of course, if Kawhi doesn't hit the craziest shot of all time, well, there's a chance that Philly beats Toronto. So I don't think the margins are super off between these two teams, you know? But to get back to that spacing thing, like, can Brook Lopez just stretch out Embiid so much to where his impact isn't felt as much? You know, if you force me to pick, I'm going to say no. Whether it's Philly just puts somebody else on Lopez because they don't think the Bucks are going to make him pay for it by posting Lopez up or whatever. I just think Embiid's still going to find a way to make the defensive impact in that kind of a series, unless they attack him directly and pick and pops. I think that's still the one way that you can force him to really move on defense. But I don't know if the Bucks are going to do that. Like, are they just going to run a million Giannis, Brook Lopez pick and pops? Like, I could definitely see them doing it, but I just don't see them doing it time after time after time. Not only that, but we have to give Embiid some sort of benefit of the doubt that he's just going to get a little better with his mobility on defense. Or at least I'm choosing to do that. We don't have to do that, but I just think with how athletic Embiid is, I think it's fair to think that he can just get better at stepping up on dudes on screens and stuff. And I do think that would kind of be the heart of that series, really. Just, can the Bucks stretch out Embiid? Is Embiid going to be able to slow down Giannis? And I feel like everything else would just kind of fall into place. But there are a lot of other things that can potentially fall into place. The Ben Simmons thing. Actually, if we're going to talk about Embiid on defense so much, talk about Embiid on offense. The Bucks may not be the Raptors defensively, but they still have a lot of dudes who can reach at him, and between like Josh Richardson and Horford, who's a slowish shooter, there are dudes you can dare to either shoot or you're comfortable closing out on them. Of course, there's always the opportunity to play off of Ben Simmons, and that's very important in this type of a series. So the Bucks will have options in terms of slowing down Embiid. Is there a possibility that Ben Simmons will develop something in the way of making teams have to think about doing something besides just going under the screen on him all day? Specifically in this Bucks series. I mean, probably not. Like, he can make floaters and pull up mid-rangers or whatever. The Bucks are still going to go under everything on the dude. And I'm not really expecting Ben Simmons to be making threes like that this season. I think he's actually going to attempt threes this year, but I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid of the Ben Simmons hitting threes on random practice gyms over the summer, you know? So to sum all that up, I do fear just how great Ben Simmons can really be against the Bucks, right? Because then if he's not able to really be that guy who can just get into the teeth of their defense and do all that, because, you know, for obvious reasons, the jumper is just so non-threatening, it makes it easier to defend the guy when he's got the ball. Well, then you're going to ask him to do the off-the-ball stuff and setting screens for dudes and all that. And I mean, we saw him do that at least one game against the Nets, and it was cool, but I just don't think it's going to be that easy against the Bucks. Like, if the only way for you to make an offensive impact is to be playing off the ball, then I just think the Bucks are too smart. They're going to figure that out pretty quickly. Like, you got to be able to do everything, and as we know, Ben Simmons cannot do everything. Now, for everything I'm saying, there is a chance that simply having a good backup center in Horford, even though he's probably going to start at power forward as well, could be all the difference that Philly really needs if we really just should buy into Embiid's on-off numbers versus the Raptors, right? Now, I'm not going to go that hard when it comes to the analytics and stuff, but I do think just getting Horford was a really big deal for these guys. I mean, the way he could stretch out and the way the Bucks, I think, would deal with Horford when he was at center, I don't really know. Like, Brook Lopez isn't going to be in there all the time. I don't even really know who the Bucks' backup five is. I think it's Robin Lopez. Do I think Robin Lopez can stretch out on Horford jumpers and all that? No, not really. So, you know, maybe there's a chance that Philly has secretly become the best team just because they're not going to be terrible when Embiid's out of the game now. But let's go to all the other dudes. Tobias Harris, Josh Richardson, Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe, Ersan Ilyasova, all these dudes. I mean, first off, we're going to have to hope, for the Bucks' sake, that Bledsoe just doesn't lay an egg again. I mean, it's 2 playoffs in a row now. I think it's fair to be scared that this guy's just going to freak out in the playoffs, and he's not going to be that same confident other ball handler that they really need. Like, if Bledsoe's not good, especially with Brogdon gone now, like, you know, Middleton, he's not going to create something out of nothing that much. Lopez can't do it. Then you're really relying on Giannis. So Bledsoe being there to beat his guy off the dribble and be a pest on defense, and he could be another dude who you could attempt to stretch out Embiid with and anything. I mean, Bledsoe probably has a better pull-up jumper than Giannis. Granted, he's no Chris Paul or anything, but that's another thing that you could attack Embiid with. So there's that. I do think George Hill would be, I don't want to say vital for the Bucks, but he's going to matter. Like, they are going to need someone to kind of be the new Brogdon. He's the closest thing to it. I mean, Wesley Matthews can make shots. Korver can make shots, but I just think Korver's going to be a defensive liability in this series. Wesley Matthews, okay, he's a dude, but George Hill's the other ball handler, and, you know, to be fair, he looked a lot better for them than he did with the Cavs, but is he just going to be making tough shots and creating offense and stuff? And not only that, but just shooting really good percentages the way Brogdon was? I mean, if you make me pick, I'm going to say no. Like, he'll be a nice piece for them. They can rely on him to not suck, which, I mean, that actually does go pretty far in the playoffs, but even so, it's not Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, that was definitely a loss for them. Now, they did get some picks out of all that stuff, so there's a chance the Bucks could make a move or two during the season to get themselves some more perimeter talent. Don't know. But I'm not expecting them to get some big-time player either. I mean, you know, if Bradley Beal ends up on this roster, then okay, but call me crazy, I don't think that's going to happen. Of course, the Bucks players simply making threes is going to matter in this, as it matters for them all the time, because that's what they do. It's 3-point shooters around Giannis. if we move on to the Sixers guys, like how big of a deal is Tobias Harris in the series? Probably a lot. I mean, we saw Jimmy Butler's shot making was huge for them, and they need that other guy who can bust out in isolation or whatever. The difference now is, though, the expectation is Ben takes more shots than Tobias and all that, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for Tobias. Like, part of me feels like he might be one of those dudes where you have to be like egging him on maybe a little too much to get him to play up to the moment, whereas if you are like, okay, Tobias, you're the number 3 guy, then he might not be as aggressive, which you're probably going to need from him in a series like this against the Bucks, whose defense is going to be really good, of course. And you're going to need more from him than just making threes. Like, he's really going to have times where he's beating, like, Middleton off the dribble or something, and I just don't know if he's going to do that enough for Philly. As far as Josh Richardson is concerned, I expect him to just be the 3-and-D athlete who doesn't take too many shots for them. And, you could have him defend Bledsoe and Middleton, and I think he can make a difference on Giannis. He's not the biggest dude in the world, Richardson, but given just his height, that could be a thing. And, I mean, that is a big part of this Philly team, the switchability that they would have against the Bucks and all that, on top of the fact, again, I don't think the Bucks are going to throw the ball to Lopez in the post like that. Now, if I remember correctly, there was times in the Raptors series where it seemed like Lopez was maybe the only dude who had the guts to really shoot the thing, and those were some shots closer to the basket, so maybe that would be a thing when the series got really deep, but I don't think the Bucks are just going to be like, oh, wait a minute, Richardson is on Lopez, let's slow everything down and get it to Brook. Also, for what it's worth, are we sure that Lopez could score over Josh Richardson all the time? I mean, Richardson's a pretty savvy dude, and not even just him, but like Tobias Harris, right? Tobias is a big dude who Lopez might not be able to back down super easily, so there's that. As far as Chris Middleton is concerned, I think most of the things I said about Tobias Harris, I think can apply to him as well, where you're just going to need dudes who can make shots, That is what a lot of this comes down to, is just who's going to make some contested threes, who's going to make some gutsy mid-range pull-ups with a guy in their face, and who's going to have those 1 or 2 crazy floaters or contested layups and all that stuff. And the crazy thing is, when I look at the perimeter talent on both teams, I don't know if either team has that guy. I mean, I'm not really considering Giannis to be a perimeter dude for this, because a lot of his offense, specifically in a series like this one, I think would be like kind of awkward, but it would still be effective, unless he's just bombing 3-pointers, which is a possibility. I mean, he's gotten to the point of being okay at like wide open threes when you give him a second, but I'm not thinking that Giannis is going to be killing the Sixers with his 3-ball, even if his percentages against the Raptors, from what I remember, were actually pretty decent. Anything else I can do to stretch this out? Well, there's the coaches, of course. If we're talking Brett Brown versus Mike Buddenholzer, I think Buddenholzer has the advantage. The criticism you can throw at Coach Bud is, well, he doesn't make enough adjustments in the postseason. The guy just kind of has the game plan and he just hopes that it works. I don't know if I totally agree with that. I mean, I would agree with that with the Hawks days, but I think the Bucks made some pretty good adjustments after the Game 1 loss to the Celtics. Granted, Kyrie just playing horribly helped him out too, but I just think they did some things differently. Not that I'm able to like articulate what those things were off the top of my head. It was just the general vibe of the team was different. And I feel like a similar thing happened against Toronto. I just think they ran into a team that, look, I mean, Kawhi averaged like 35 in that series, and their defense was great. And again, Bledsoe was really bad, so I think Bud could get a little bit of a bad rep when it comes to his playoff stuff. So I would definitely take him over Brett Brown, who I think is a little bit more of the like, well, hopefully we just figure it out, guys. Anyway, if I can make a prediction 7 or 8 months before this series happens or maybe doesn't happen at all. I think I will hesitantly go with the Bucks just because I'm afraid that Ben Simmons is just going to score like 14 points a game, and Tobias Harris is going to be like kind of similar, and Embiid's going to be really, really good, but it's not going to be enough to overcome his team just not scoring enough. And that's even with me believing that Philly's defense will do a pretty damn good job with the Bucks and Giannis and all that. I just don't know if the shot making is there for Philly. Like, they lost Jimmy, they lost Redick, and there's that. But I do want to say, it's a hesitant pick for the Bucks because part of me does think that, like, specifically in a 7-game series versus each other, there's a chance Embiid can outplay Giannis. There's a chance Bledsoe will suck. There's also a chance that the Bucks' shot making will not be good enough against a really good defense. And there's also another chance that Horford is perhaps even more valuable than any of us realize, even if the dude might average what he averages. So, yeah, I mean, if you ask me this tomorrow, I might have a different opinion, but as of right now, I think the Bucks would beat the Sixers in 6 or 7 games. And, yeah,